Welcome, fellow explorers. My name is Christian Alexanderson, and this is Hemlocks to Hellbenders, a podcast highlighting Pennsylvania's parks, forests, and great outdoors. Many of these podcast episodes follow a similar pattern. Intro a state park or forest, provide some stats, and then an interview with a stranger. While I like to believe the incredible park and forest managers, volunteers, educators, and scientists I speak to are my friends after the interview, they typically aren't my friends before the interview. That's not the case for this episode. I've known my guest Wes Robinson for more than a decade, beginning when we started at our new jobs together at PennLive, the Patriot News. We quickly bonded. When it comes to friends, I tend to seek out fun, critical thinkers. Someone that can challenge me and make me laugh. Someone who will get right to the line and roundly cross it. Someone who has a strong moral character and a diabolical sense of humor. Wes is one of the only friends I have that I love arguing with. His take on things offers a unique perspective that I truly value. And because of that perspective, he can often win me over to his side of an argument. But he wouldn't call it an argument, he'd call it a discussion. After I left journalism, I worked to bring Wes with me to the Pennsylvania Senate. We'd see each other at press conferences, events, and at our semi-regular Journalism Survivors Guild lunch. Then in 2021, Wes took an amazing opportunity to become the press secretary for the Pennsylvania Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. During that same time, I decided to run a mile in all then 121 Pennsylvania state parks. So as I was discovering the outdoors, Wes was doing much of the same thing professionally. Wes was one of only 3 people that joined me on my 121 in 21 challenge. On a sweltering day in July, Wes ran 1 mile at 7 state parks with me. It was yet another example of him being a great supporter and going the extra mile, so to speak, for a friend. As I was developing this podcast in 2022, I knew its success depended on whether I could get guests. From the very beginning, Wes worked hard to make sure I was able to find guests that would highlight our amazing outdoor spaces. Technically, in his position as press secretary, getting me guests is his job. But fortunately for me in the Commonwealth, Wes is very good at his job. Any DCNR guest that has ever appeared on this show is because of Wes. Wes is the sort of person that loves seeing his friends succeed. And he'll do as much as he can to introduce you to the right people, send the email to the right organization, or bring you along to a networking event. Not to curry favors, not to make himself look good, but to make you look good. While I say this later on in the episode, I want to make it clear up front that this podcast would not exist without Wes. His generosity, hard work, and legitimacy in the outdoor space is the only reason I can make Hemlocks to Hellbenders. So what is this episode about? How awesome Wes is? A little. What work is going on at DCNR? Absolutely. But it's also about 2 friends whose journey of falling in love with the outdoors is connected. It's about what can be done with the right people at the right time. And it's about what we can all do to support each other and our wonderful public lands. I'm excited to welcome Wes Robinson to the podcast. Wes is the press secretary for the Pennsylvania Department of Conservation and Natural Resources and my very good friend. Wes, thanks so much for joining the program.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm a big fan of the podcast, obviously helping get DCNR guests on, but also just helping expand people's knowledge of conservation. I really appreciate that about this podcast. So happy to be on and join you.
What does a press secretary for DCNR do?
So, it's funny that you asked that. I'm going to tell a story after I just sort of answered the general question about how I sort of came to understand the role of a press secretary very differently. For DCNR, we are a relatively large state agency that has tentacles all over Pennsylvania. You hear about the 2.2 million acres of state forest lands and the 124 state parks, our support of more than 6,100 local parks, 81,000 miles of streams. We are everywhere. So my job is to reach people where they are through the media to help understand the agency better, our initiatives, our goals. Sometimes it's more about our people, sometimes it's more about places, sometimes it's more about things. And it's a really, really great opportunity to advance the messaging around conservation and make connections to nature with people in ways that they might not get otherwise. And the story I want to tell is back in 2023, beginning of the year, I got COVID and spent a bunch of time at home because I couldn't go anywhere and needed to recover. And I started watching House of Cards, and the Seth, the press secretary on that show, and his whole evolution and rise as a communications professional made me look at myself and say, maybe I've been doing this all wrong. I don't know. You've seen the show, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and it's like he was an interesting character because he had a lot of interest and he had his own ambition. And I think for me, why that matters is I hadn't really thought of the role of a press secretary as somebody who could advance their own initiatives as well. So this past year has been a lot of fun in taking the experiences I've had as somebody who goes out to lots of different places, meets lots of different people, and shares a lot of messages from our higher level staff, and becoming somebody who's also speaking for myself in some ways, and making the connections to nature conservation, energy and environment issues in ways that are important to me that I think other people need to learn. And that's been a really cool experience with DCNR, is just kind of being able to bring more of myself to the job.
Mhm.
That's been a really, really cool experience. So thanks for the question.
I have to think too, I'm not going to throw any other departments under the bus, but it has to be fun to be able to get the sort of content you're able to get through DCNR as opposed to another department that's way more boring.
So yes and no. I think you'd be surprised, and I think actually going back to my praise for your podcast, I think why I find it so interesting is you're able to show people like the fun and the engaging part of it. That is, what drives most of the people who work at DCNR to do what they do. Um, but there is a lot of bureaucracy and red tape and politics and stuff behind the scenes. So it is, don't get me wrong, I enjoy what I do and like the experience, but it is a lot less. It is still incredibly fun, but it's a lot less fun than you'd think because there is a lot of real and meaningful work. And you've had a ton of our people on, and I think one of the things that comes through in the communication, Tim Morey, I think, was the best at this, just like how much work goes into making sure natural spaces are consumable for the general public.
Yeah.
It is really, really hard to do. And I think you, like I said, still a lot of fun. But it's really hard work.
You're an accomplished journalist. What are the similarities and differences of a press secretary to traditional journalism?
Accomplished is a very, 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 very operative word in the way that you're using that right now. I did journalism. We'll just put it that way.
Very
Um,
skilled journalist.
skill. Again, we're gonna do the thing where it's like that's a very operative word. But yeah, it is very similar. So the skill set that you and I have, you are a more accomplished and skilled journalist who won awards and was able to demonstrate to the people um who signed the paychecks that you're an accomplished and skilled journalist. Um, I more so just kind of did stuff and was like, hey, if we get awards, we get awards, but I don't care that much. Anyways, um, I think it's very similar. A lot of the same skills that you need for journalism are great for being a communications professional. Um, I think where I struggle is, journalism, you're searching for the truth. As a professional, you're trying to present things in the best light. Communications professional, you're trying to present things in the best light. And that is a difficult adjustment for me, but I think it's a worthwhile adjustment because it sort of almost makes that shift to looking at the positives and focusing on what is great about something and making it improve. But back to your actual question, I think the a good journalist wants to know who, what, where, when, why, and how. And those are really, really great skills for me to have in this role. I was actually thinking about this earlier today. You know how little kids like around 2, 3, 4, 5 start to ask why for everything? Like I'm a big why person.
Yeah.
Why do we do this? Why is this way? You talked about having Alan Dietrich Ward on the podcast, and he's given some conservation talks to our agency that have been really helpful in understanding the mindset and the ethos of conservation in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
I've got the book that you gave me about John Muir and Gifford Pinchot, and that's like on my immediate reading list for 2025. And like that is also going to inform that perspective. Like I think people don't really know that the issues around conservation are a lot deeper than
Mm-hmm.
just show up and here's a park. So the the ability to kind of sift through and find the truth, that's a useful skill anywhere.
And I think it's important too is that there can be multiple truths in terms of one of the things that Alan Dietrich Ward talks a lot about is that in conservation, there's always winners and losers. Depending on how you want to look at it, yes, we have this park, but who got displaced? Or yes, this trail was built, but what did it take to get there? I think that's a really important aspect of not only looking forward to the future and recognizing all the great work that's being done, but also looking at maybe the missteps of the past to make sure those things aren't done in the future.
Right. And I think that is something that I think journalism struggles with now, because of the rise of iterative reporting and providing information without always having that context. So someone hears something about healthcare and they don't know that FDR was like, hey, uh, we could probably make healthcare universal if it weren't for racial issues in the country. So when we're still talking about that in 2024, it's a byproduct of something from back in the past that never was actually resolved. And I think the other thing is that's really important, and it's a good skill for anybody, but especially in a press secretary role, you have to be able to ask questions and ask people good questions. A lot of our staff are really, really good and technical and or technical experts, but that's not always the best for an interview subject or to meet the general public where they are. So, being able to ask those questions is really important. And I kind of can't wait to look forward to asking you some questions a little bit later.
Oh no. How important is it to humanize DCNR and tell people's stories? Kind of coming off the back of that.
It is, it is, it is monumentally important. You don't, I am really, really amazed and often awestruck by the dedication of the people who make public lands accessible for everyone. These are not easy jobs. We've had a bunch of wildfires this year, and we've had forestry staff that the folks who go out west to help people in Montana and Idaho and Colorado or wherever we need to send them or had to stay here this year in the fall and fight wildfires all over the state. Um, you have park managers who are always on call and dealing with um, incidents and complaints and issues at their parks. You have people who run grant programs, manage grant programs who are driving all over the place, making sure they're connected to communities, making sure people understand what we do and have the information they need. It is a really, really, really important um, role to make that connection to those people. Because if you don't understand how hard it is to do some of this stuff, you would think that like you just flip a switch and it's like, okay, conservation just happens.
Yeah.
Um, so having those people, those individuals, those stories, and then getting their passion across. One of my favorite tasks is to write the news releases for the new managers or managers or uh, district foresters. We have managers for all of the state parks. Some are complex, so are in park complexes. So there aren't 124 park managers, but there are quite a few of them, more than I think it's like 80 or 90 or so. And then the district foresters, we have 20 forest districts, and then writing those news releases helps me connect to the staff and then helps tell that story to the community. So when, you know, we get a new manager at Toby Hanna State Park Complex, the community understands who that person is and what motivates them. But then I also get to share that passion and understand that passion because it's like it's I think when you're having a bad day and you don't know why you show up to work, you remember that you're working for people to help people like that who are showing up every day in spite of, whatever situation's happening in their life.
Yeah, and when it comes to highlighting people that work for DCNR, never have I heard anybody that said, "Oh, I got in it for the money." They're doing it because they love the outdoors. They love being able to teach people things or be able to serve the public. Like it's noble work.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And beyond it being noble work, I think it is rewarding work
Mm-hmm.
in that you can see the impact of it when, you're a manager at Point State Park and there are more than 3 million people showing up every year. Like that's what I think is the the pay that you don't see.
Mm-hmm. What is DCNR working on that you think people should know about?
Oh, well, geez, there are so many things. I think I I I might need to start calling myself a DCNR evangelist because anytime you start talking about what people need to know, I'm like, oh, we're doing this and we're doing that and we're doing that and we're doing that. So I think the big thing is the Office of Outdoor Recreation is up and running, and I know you've had Nathan on before, and I thought that was a really good conversation getting into how our outdoor recreation sector can be more beneficial to Pennsylvanians, and then how Pennsylvanians can connect to it more. The outdoor recreation economy in from 2022 to 2023 rose 10% to about 19 billion dollars. And that is like huge because when you think about like the fact that people going outside and experiencing nature, which is good for their physical and mental health, but now it's good for the economic health of the Commonwealth. That's a really, really good message to put out there. And, it's I have different perspectives on this stuff. I'm originally from Washington State, as you know, and outdoor recreation is kind of par for the course. I was not a huge outdoor recreationist; it's more of like a city urban recreationist, when I growing up. And the further I get away from home and spend more time other places, I see that like when you invest in outdoor recreation in that way, and Kentucky, where I finished high school, went to college, they do that, and Pennsylvania starting to do that. You kind of shift the mindset of people away from the traditional industry that has fueled a lot of the smaller towns and rural areas in Pennsylvania and get people thinking about the excitement around outdoor recreation and those opportunities for quality careers, meaningful work that is rewarding and also makes you feel good. And yeah, it will be stressful, but it is, it's a different paradigm. I think the other thing is, we're doing a good job to encourage access and get more people outdoors. Um, we are working on our 5-year plan for outdoor recreation from 2025 to 2029. And in that data, more than 80% of the public Pennsylvanians said outdoor recreation is beneficial to their mental health. So for me, as a person of color, Black person, who knows that my community does not get outdoors at the same rate as other communities, as somebody who is an ally for other communities that maybe don't feel comfortable outdoors, or especially in the disabled community, don't have access to the outdoors, seeing that people respond well to the outdoors, it's like, okay, so all of our work for access and our Mosaic initiative, which is um, trying to point to opportunities for people with different identities to get outdoors, whether you're a veteran, whether you're somebody in a wheelchair, whether you are LGBTQ. Like we want to make sure that everyone sees themselves in the outdoors. So we've had a really good year with that. We launched the Outdoors for All Day initiative with Lieutenant Governor Austin Davis, and that was a really, really cool opportunity to see him get on a bike and pedal around Pittsburgh. I think a lot of times we think of outdoor recreation as you got to go somewhere far, and it's like, no, we've got a state park in the middle of a really big city, but then also like there are people working uh, to make sure that like you can enjoy recreation and transportation in that way. Um, 2024 was a big year for grants, and at DCNR, we awarded $80 million to a couple hundred projects around the state. And, that is really, really big because you can see that impact, whether that's a rec center, whether that's a new trail, whether that's a community pool. We're touching people in communities all over the state, and it's imperative that people understand that that's a really critical role that we provide, and that role that we provide helps sort of expand access and connect people to nature in different ways. Um, we are again leading the nation in old growth forest network uh, sites. So we have 37. We're ahead of Ohio again.
Let's go. Let's go.
Yeah, the thing that I am very much a proponent of, like Governor Shapiro, is beating friggin' Ohio. So it's always great. And I'm well, okay, well, and your wife is from Ohio, and so that's one of those things I love to pick on her about too. We got to be better than Ohio. You can cut that if you need to. One of the coolest experiences I had this year, and this is like personally, like you should know about DCNR, but also like a something to think about within respect to states collaborating. We went down to Maryland earlier this year to talk about how DCNR and Maryland's Department of Natural Resources can work better together. The Fair Hill Recreation Area runs up to the border of Pennsylvania, and then Big Elk Creek State Park runs up to the border of Pennsylvania and Maryland. And there are Mason-Dixon line stones in between those parks. And like it was really cool to actually see the Mason-Dixon line stone. Like I've heard about that, I guess since middle school, learning about the Civil War, but actually seeing it in action was really, really cool. And I think we've got some, especially in that area, there are some cool things in store to make sure that people, on both sides of the border get a chance to enjoy both sides of both parks and or natural spaces. And then we have the regular stuff that we do every single year that is really, really fun. The Trail of the Year, that's an event I go to every year, and I love to learn more about our trails. Pennsylvania has some of the best trails in the country, probably the world too, but I don't I haven't gotten out on too many international trails. Um, and then the River of the Year, that is always fun. I don't paddle very often. In fact, before the 2022 River of the Year, I don't think I had gotten in a kayak or canoe in like 10 or 11 years. So, it was fun to the French Creek in what county is that? Is that Venango County? Um, we pushed off in Meadville. Um, and I hadn't paddled in so long. It was a 7 mile paddle. I probably paddled at least 14 going back and forth from uh, stream bank to stream bank until one of our rangers, Chris Hall, he and his family joined us, and he was like, "Here's how you do this," and it was really cool. I think that's part of the reason why I like a lot of our staff too, is like they see me floundering or being willing to try the outdoors, because like I said, I like being outdoors. I like trying new things, but I'm not like somebody who is like, yeah, let's go do a backpacking trip for 20 miles in a weekend. Like I had something set up to do that this year, didn't get a chance to do it for a bunch of different reasons. But anyway, the point is, we've got a lot going on, and there's always so much going on. And I hope that people understand that um, DCNR and a lot of the partners that we work with, our conservancy partners, our environmental partners, they're all doing great work, and keeping up with it is it's difficult, but it's worth it.
I think it's also important to think about when we talk about making Pennsylvania outdoors a more inclusive space? I think a lot of people kind of just look at it on the surface and they go, well, there's a park down the street. That's as inclusive as you can get. I mean, it's right here. Anyone could drive to it. It's like, there's a lot of things you have to think about when we talk about inclusivity. And it's something that I've been thinking a lot more about, especially since starting this podcast, about accessibility, location of parks, what kind of trails are available, what kind of facilities are available.
Mm-hmm.
I like to see that you may have had a lot of conversations about this in the past, but I really like to see that the organization or the department is taking that seriously, moving forward with planning for new parks and making things more accessible for the future or what's currently available.
Well, I think that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, the history. Once you understand how and why some of this stuff happened, you look at it a little differently because it's not just well, everyone should be welcome because it's an open space. You know, you kind of have to look at history and understand that we're not just dealing with a situation happening in a vacuum.
Yeah.
And to that point, I think, as somebody who doesn't really mind picking up and going anywhere, like I am sensitive to the fact that not everyone is like me. I am a larger person who is somewhat physically imposing, but also somewhat physically welcoming. So, there are a lot of places that I go where it's like, I'm going to get treated differently than somebody else. And, when I do a lot of stuff with DCNR, I'm mindful of the fact that I'm generally traveling with a secretary or a deputy or staff who are in that community. So I have a different experience than the layperson who would show up in regular outdoors clothes. As a matter of fact, to that point, when I do get a chance to go out and hike, I try to talk to people and just pick their brains, see why they're out and what they like. And a lot of times, like there's that moment when, like, I can see that moment when someone's like, oh, this guy's not joshing me. Like he actually is somebody who gets outdoors and spends time in nature and does know nature a little bit and is willing to engage. That even happens with some of our staff. And I don't always see that as a bad thing. I think I encourage people to give nature a try. And when you go to somewhere on a public land, make sure that you connect with staff. I think we have some of the most welcoming staff and people who are willing to answer questions on weekends. Educators are running programs all the time. That's a great chance to get outside, learn more about nature, and tear down some of those barriers, both, perceived and in your own mind.
And now, let's hear from our sponsors. Join the Keystone Trails Association's Trail Care team to show some love to the trails that you love. KTA organizes hands-on stewardship events and training workshops to maintain and expand hiking trails in Pennsylvania. You can find a trail care event near you. Check out KTA's schedule of events online at kta-hike.org. Are you looking for your next adventure? Unlock some of the best landscapes in Pennsylvania with incredibly detailed, highly curated, waterproof trail maps from the folks at Purple Lizard. They create extraordinary maps of Pennsylvania state forests for people who love to explore the outdoors. Find them at your local outfitters, bike shops, and bookstores, or visit purplelizard.com, where your next adventure begins. Refresh your love of Pennsylvania state parks and forests this spring with the Pennsylvania Parks and Forests Foundation. Stay in the know by finding events on Meetup or their website, signing up for the weekly e-newsletter, following them on social media, joining a local friends group, or accessing resources online at paparksandforests.org. Together, we can help conserve Pennsylvania's natural resources, support education, and remove barriers to an inclusive outdoor experience for everyone. Looking for a way to add some local Pennsylvania flair to your space? Check out Sister Sunflowers. They create unique stickers inspired by small local spaces that make your community shine. From quirky caves to hidden local gems, their stickers bring your favorite places to life. Perfect for your laptop, water bottle, or anywhere that needs a little hometown love. For both locals and visitors, there are stickers, magnets, prints, and more celebrating Pennsylvania's most iconic parks and forests. And for more avid explorers, there's even a hand-drawn poster to keep track of the Pennsylvania state parks and forests that you've been to. Use code HELLBENDER15 at checkout to get 15% off your first order. Support local, inspire adventure, and decorate with meaning, only at Sister Sunflowers. Shop local and celebrate the places that make your town special. All right, back to the show. Do you have a favorite place to visit in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, so this is a great question for a lot of different reasons. I'll give you three different answers. So the place I visit the most in this area is Boyd Big Tree. I used to live right around the corner, not that far. It's a great place to go hike, get away and get kind of a wilderness type experience without going too far from Harrisburg. The park I visit the most outside of this area somehow is Presque Isle. We've ended up there a bunch for different events, and the past couple times I've had time to actually go explore a little bit more. The first few times I went, we were there and it was part of, a bunch of different events. So I think I've been there like 10 times now, and I learn a little bit more about the park, get to experience a little bit more there, um, about it in that way. And then in terms of like my favorite place to go and just look. The Michaud has some great views. And once you get to the end of the Pole Steeple Trail or up at Chimney Rocks or whatever, like you just look out and see like just how beautiful the the area is, and like I love doing that.
What's the hardest part of your job?
So you know me, I am a people person who's not a people person. As in like I do spend a lot of time getting to know people, keeping track of people, making sure that like people feel good and are empowered whenever I'm around. But that gets difficult when you have, you know, 2,800 full and part-time employees that you work with. And I really do try hard to get to know everyone. And because everyone has their own interesting story. And I wish this was like a video podcast because you could just like, I just have this huge smile on my face because there are so many people that I work with who like, just like, I don't know, they inspire me. But it's hard when you can't, this past year I've had to shift to looking more at our larger, bigger picture stuff. So I don't get out as much. Matter of fact, recently the manager at Kings Gap Environmental Education Center was in central office for an award we got for um, something or other. I don't remember what it was, but it's like a National Defensive Driving Award. If I could pull out exactly what it was, I would. I can maybe send it to you later. Doesn't really matter. But anyways, I haven't seen him this calendar year, and I don't think I haven't seen him since he left Gifford Pinchot. And he's been like, when you start somewhere and you're new and you kind of don't know where you're going, and then you have people who are just like kind and willing to help and then are exemplary, like in their actions and their words, like it means a lot.
Hmm.
So like hadn't seen Gavin literally in like a year plus, and just seeing him like made my day. And that's the hard part, is like not being able to fill that personal need of making those connections and staying in touch with people as much as I can, um, because we're at a point, Governor Shapiro has been really great at investing in the outdoors and making it a priority as a part of his administration. And with that comes the challenges of, with more visibility comes more opportunities to be in the media, more questions about what we do and how we work and how we operate. So, the I've in focusing more on the work, I've had to scale back on some of the people, and like finding that balance is really difficult for me, but I'm gonna try to do better around that this year.
So, what's the most exciting part of your job?
So I can't say it enough. Working with these amazing people, there are a lot of great people. Secretary Dunn, who you interviewed for the podcast, is great. She's tremendous. Um, our deputies, John Norbeck, Mike Walsh, Claire Jantz, they're great, really smart people, and move things in the right direction. Senior advisor Gretchen Leslie is just like a force of nature and an incredible, like I've learned a lot from her in my time at DCNR, and it's been really powerful to work for people who think strategically at that level. My boss, Chris Novak, is like just a master communicator. And you think about people staying in an appointed role for as long as she has, like it's a testament to how good she is. But beyond that, in our programs, we have so many incredible people. At our parks, we have so many great people, educators, managers, program managers, division chiefs, uh, you name it. Like there are a lot of great people who are really, really willing and generous with their time and their knowledge. Um, I got an email not that long ago about a Washington Post reporter interested in a conversation interested in information about a presentation that one of our geologists was giving, and it was around green concrete. And I'm looking at it and I'm just like, wait a minute, how am I just now finding out about this? Like, I didn't like, I just assume all concrete was the same. Obviously, I know like I did okay in earth science, so I know that it's not all the same, but I haven't tapped into that part of my brain in a long time. So reading that, I'm like, man, there's so many ideas I have here for social media content, which is not my role, but like passing on and making that connection for maybe a news release or a press event around that, or just making that geologist available to people so that instead of reading stories in the news that are kind of misinformed or only halfway uh, relevant, you have something that can help people better understand conservation. So I I think that is the most exciting part of the job and the thing that keeps me coming back.
I think a number of outdoor lovers would say that press secretary for DCNR would be like a dream job because you've been able to visit so many wonderful places. What is that like for you to just be able to travel so much around this Commonwealth?
Depends on the day you ask me. Um, so like I said, I because I am a people person who's not a people person, like I'm an introvert to my core. I play an extrovert on television. And so that part with the travel can be a little difficult because, you need that time alone to recharge. I am very much like uh I am very much one with my habitat. So, a couple nights on the road or being in the car for a little too long takes me off kilter, but I think to get to the positive and the question that you actually asked, like, oh God, it's great. There are days where it's like my job is to go somewhere pretty, take pictures, talk to people, evangelize about nature, and go home. That's tremendous. That is absolutely tremendous. And so now this is where I take the microphone from you. And I want to just flip this because one of the things that is I found to be really interesting about this podcast is you you are showing a little bit, not a little bit, a lot of yourself through your interest, the topics that you engage on, the people that you speak to. But like I don't know that your audience knows as much about you as they should, right? Because you're doing the journalism thing, but let's turn the lens back on you. So now that you've done what, like 60 episodes?
We'll probably be around 50 by the time, yeah.
Okay. So yeah, now that you've done that many episodes, like what's your conservation dream job? Like what would you do if you could just say tomorrow, like, you know what? I'm done doing social media. I want to work for DCNR or I want to work in conservation. And what would you do based on all of your interviews and experiences?
That's really hard. Let me make it abundantly clear that I love my job and I'm not currently looking for a job in conservation.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah, yeah. I should have saved this well, actually, the question for last is the one that's gonna make people mad. But yeah.
it's difficult because I mean, your job sounds pretty dope. I'll be secretary for DCNR, but it's the thing I always kind of think about, or the what I concern myself with is that I'm so fortunate to be able to make this my hobby, but also make
Hmm.
it my passion. So I'm always worried that if I were to ever make something my job, then it becomes less fun. Which is a concern because I'm a person that collects hobbies. I absolutely love a hobby, but
Hmm.
this podcast and the outdoors has really taken over everything. So, working for DCNR, I think would be an absolute delight. Doing social media for DCNR could always be a lot of fun. Just being able to travel and meet so many dedicated professionals. Running an outdoor organization, a nonprofit, that would be a lot of fun. Being able to help different parks or different forests, different groups. That would be really cool. If we're thinking about more country, I think anything with the National Park Service, the people that do National Park Service social media content are the best in the world. They are hilarious. They do such a phenomenal job. They're so fun to engage in their content. If we were to just say maybe worldwide, anything for Iceland. I mean, if I was paid enough money to just like sweep up trash bins around like Reykjavik, I'll go do that. That would be nice. I don't think my wife would join me, but I would have no problem doing that.
That's hilarious. So I got to go back to two things. One, what you said about like your passion becoming a job. One of the conversations that stopped me from going into sports journalism, I talked to Sally Jenkins with the Washington Post after she came to UK's campus and gave like an hour and a half lecture. And I talked to her for about half an hour after that. She was really generous with her time. And she's like, yeah, like if you're going to do this, you need to know that you're probably going to lose love for the thing that you love. And I was like, should probably avoid that. So that's really wise. And then I think, you know, I know you're trying to not scare anyone into thinking you want to leave, and I respect that completely. But that's actually so one of the cool things that I've seen and learned is like we have a lot of people who DCNR is their second career. So like, you retire from whatever and then you come and work for us. So, I think, or volunteer. I think volunteering, you talked about doing this as a hobby. Like volunteering is a great way for people to get engaged and involved. So, I think I appreciate that answer and appreciate you thinking about that. What's your favorite way to learn about nature? And I ask this because, like, you've given me books, which is reading. But then, like, you go and I went with you when you did your 121 and 21. So you actually go out to places and see things, but then you call people and do interviews like this. And you've gone to programs, you've hosted your own programs at parks with different influencers and people who are into nature. So, like, how do you enjoy learning about nature the most? Not like out of all of these mediums and out of all of these things that you do to try to make it engaging for you.
I'd say the top two. I mean, the first one is always going to visit parks. I think there's nothing like having boots on ground to like see the waterfall you read about and been like, oh, I get it. Like, I think there's something really valuable in traveling. And when my wife and I first got married, we had a conversation about what our life was going to look like. How much do we want to do this? If kids were an option, if we were going to travel. And we decided to really focus on our lives and our careers and traveling. And when the pandemic hit, it was kind of one of those things is like, well, that's what we want our life to be. We want to go do 2 weeks in Cuba. We want to go do a week in Scotland. We want to go travel and have fun. When that was taken away from us, we were like, we have to keep doing this. So what are we going to do? So then we start, visiting all the parks. I decided to run at all the parks, but then my wife's become really passionate about parks and forests too. So being able to get out in nature, being able to see the things that you read about, I was always a video games air conditioning kid. Not to say that I didn't love playing sports or I didn't like doing athletic things. Nature wasn't something I grew up with. I didn't grow up with a hunting family or a fishing family, really. I didn't grow up with people that like to hike. So being able to discover this in my 30s has been the best part of my life. So I love being able to visit places. The other thing is maybe my favorite thing in the whole world is talking to people who have a passion for something. There's something, I didn't go to school for journalism. I actually started working for a newspaper before I started working for my college newspaper because I just want to learn things about people. I want to talk to people and be able to write. And so I think what got me into journalism is the thing that got me so far in my hobby of podcasting and things like that, which is just a curiosity. There's nothing I enjoy better than being able to talk to somebody and go, oh, like, what are you into? And they're like, oh, well, I work here. I'm like, no, not like what you work, like what you do for a living. Like, what do you care about? What do you love? And they just like, you could see their eyes light up. Like and that's what I get from meeting so many people in the outdoors, especially so many people from like DCNR. They're like, oh, I'm really into like this. I'm like, talk to me about it. Like, what do you tell me about it? And you could just see they're like, okay, and then this, and then do you know part of the manufacturing process is like this? And you could see them get so excited.
Hmm.
That's how I feel when I talk about the outdoors. Like I could almost see like people's eyes start to roll because I care so much about it and I'm so passionate about it. So I love when people are like, if I meet somebody and they have an interesting career, that's going to be the next hour of my life is learning about them. So I love that. That's what makes me doing this podcast so personally fulfilling is just being able to see people light up when they get to tell me about something they love so much.
Hmm. And that's where we're similar. Like that's one of my favorite parts about the job, but instead of it being, like you, where you're sharing it with with your entire audience, like for me, most of that stuff is just like, oh, okay, that now I'm learning and now I understand better. But I really like what you said about seeing it, and it's like, oh, I get it. Like that's why that's goes back to the travel question. Like I like to travel because it's like words on a paper don't mean anything to me. My imagination died when I was like 10. So, like, there's only so much that I can say, oh, this wonderful vista is like, no, until I see that vista, it's not real. And when I see that vista, it's like, oh, that's the greatest thing I've ever seen till I see the next vista. And now it's like, okay, you got to manage that because not everything can be the greatest thing that you've seen.
And I think it's one of those things. I say it all the time, and I do truly mean it. Like, I do feel like when I started going out the outdoors, I saw in color for the first time. It was a life altering, completely changed my perspective sort of moment. And it's like, yes, I was able to go other places and travel different parts of the world and see beautiful things, but but to realize that it's so close and it's right here, and all you
Hmm.
have to do is get a little bit out of your neighborhood and travel a little bit. It's just so incredibly rewarding, and yeah, it's been the best part of my life. There's only so much Thoreau you could read before you start going like, what is this guy talking about the nature so much? Like, I guess this stuff is pretty cool. And then you go out and you see these things, and they could be the best thing you do that day, that week, that month. And it's not only physically, it's obviously mental health and those sort of things.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And then now it's your turn. This podcast is your Thoreau work, right?
Yeah.
You're,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think so. Like, there's nothing better. There's no comment I like more when people say like, "Oh, we heard about this and we went there."
Hmm.
Like those are my favorite things when people are like, you know what? I had no idea anything about James Buchanan, but I decided to visit the park, and then oh look, we looked at the Big Pyramid, and that's really cool. Or I didn't know you could do this at Presque Isle or Allegheny Islands is wild. I had no idea that was even a park in the middle of the river and things like that.
Yeah.
That discovery is my favorite part of just being able to see something that I can help other people realize about this Commonwealth.
Hmm. It's a good answer.
I try.
And then last question. And I need one answer this time. What has been your favorite interview? And we know you like them all, and we know you've enjoyed every subject you've had, but what's been your favorite? And we only want one answer.
Okay, I'm gonna give you two. Um, no,
Why? Why?
because I'll tell you why. So at the time of recording, my favorite has been the Secretary
Hmm.
Dunn, because I have a huge amount of admiration for her and the amount of work that she's done to progress DCNR forward. The fact that she knows who I am and is like, yeah, I'll do that, is like so like it's so incredible. Like to do something as a hobby and then to have the person who's at the top of the pyramid who you want to talk to is like, yes, I will take time out of my day to talk to you. I think that was just such a like huge morale boost. Like it took me a long time to realize that like it's not like my wife and family members hitting download over and over again. Like real people are listening to this podcast, you know. So the fact that she was so great and very vulnerable, especially towards the end of the podcast episode, was just so incredibly sweet. I love that episode so much. And then I will do that was number one and 1A. I was
Well,
able.
wait. I just got to say one thing before you go to 1A.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Yes, very much so. Thank you.
It's just I was watching some stuff about Kobe the other day, and then the Kobe system commercials came up, and then yeah, so it's been in my mind.
The other one where I find it necessary to is I did a short episode about being able to run a mile to Allegheny Island State Park. I interviewed my buddy Adam Bricker, who was so nervous to talk to me. He was so sweet about it. And at the time, you know, he was like, man, I just don't want to disappoint you. I just don't want to. I was like, you're going to do great, you know. And while his like personality maybe didn't shine through because he was just so damn nervous to talk about it, earlier in 2024, he passed away. So being able to have that like recording of like friends talking is like really meaningful and not something I expected that I would want to hold on to so much.
No, that's a really bad answer. Well, it's a good answer, but like I feel like we had so much positive energy, and now we're gonna close on like, yeah, my energy, my interview with my late friend. Oh.
Listen, 1 and 1A. I told you it was it was important.
Well, maybe we could have flipped the order and had it be a little less somber. I guess no, well, no, we can't leave on that note. Actually, no, I will say, yeah, because I think I can say this in and sort of tie the friendship thing together. I think for me, I am very grateful for your willingness to push forward in sharing your love of the outdoors and bringing people along. I think what happens with a lot of what people do in nature is very individual. And building community around the outdoors, both as a person who is pulling people in your life, but then someone who's pulling people in through the podcast medium. Like, I really do genuinely appreciate it. And I thank you for having me on today, whatever day it is.
Well, I'm not going to let you leave that easy. I will just say, though I don't know, I haven't written the intro yet, but Wes and I have worked in 2 different jobs together. He finally decided to leave for DCNR, and this is the first time in our friendship where he's working at one place, I'm working at another place. And this podcast would not be possible without Wes. He is the person that gets my DCNR interviews. He's the person that comes out with interesting topics and things to talk about. He has been, aside from my amazing wife, he has been the biggest supporter of this podcast and such a great friend to have. I value our friendship a great deal, and I love the work that you're doing for DCNR and pushing forward in so many important aspects. So thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate you.
You're welcome.
I want to thank my guest, Wes Robinson, for joining the podcast. Be sure to follow us on Instagram and Meta for more information about upcoming episodes. You can support the podcast by buying merch at hemlockstohellbenders.com, or you can click support this show in the podcast description to provide a monthly donation. This has been Hemlocks to Hellbenders. I'll see you out there. Hosting, production, and editing by Christian Alexanderson. Music by John Sauer. Graphics by Matt Davis.